Good morning. I am Rabbi Jonathan Freirich, and I welcome you to Crossroads. The network of religious communities sponsors this program, Crossroads, and it's a joint production with Town Square Media. Who is the Network of Religious Communities? It's an organization of denominations, congregations, and religious organizations located in and serving everyone here in Western New York. We are every type of religion you can imagine. We are Baha'i and Buddhist, Christian, Hindu, Jewish, Muslim, Sikh, and Unitarian. And together we celebrate the wonderful religious diversity of Western New York. And on Crossroads, we discuss all sorts of stuff. Since Rabbi Alex Lazarus Klein and I have taken over this time slot, I imagine it's been skewed towards Jewish topics and topics of Jewish interest, but we try to bring non-Jews, people from other backgrounds, to discuss things. So we discuss life journeys and community service with our guests. Today, I am truly honored to be joined by one of my favorite colleagues, Reverend Tom Yorty, who is the senior pastor at Westminster Presbyterian Church. Our sister house of worship, Temple Beth Zion and Westminster, have served as mutual homes for one another when beset by things like arson and difficulty and fire. Although we don't know, were they arson? No, they were accidental fires.
I think that's the tradition. I'd not heard arson before, but
so please, we'll scratch that from the record. Rabbi Jonathan Freirich has not illuminated anything in the cold case file of.
You never know.
So, thank you for joining us, Tom.
Oh, Jonathan, it's great to be here always, and to be with you, and to be sharing, this work we do together.
So this work we do together is what brings us together. One of the things that you and I share an interest in is we both serve our community through this thing called the Racial Equity Roundtable, which is a project of the Community Foundation of Greater Buffalo, and who have been focused on increasing racial equity in our fair city in Buffalo, understanding that there's what they call an equity. When there's greater racial equity in a place, there is greater economic security for everybody. This strange idea that when we all do better, we all do better.
Yeah, all boats are lifted. And it's interesting that there's actually there are studies that document and verify exactly that. So there are two reasons to do this, right? One is the economic reason, but the more important reason is the moral ethical reason.
Oh, you mean we should be motivated by some sort of central teaching?
Yes.
So, the word I was looking for is there's in fact what a quantifiable racial equity dividend. That the higher the level of equity, the higher the level of socioeconomic, and as you pointed out, one might say moral, ethical security in a place. So you and I are servants to these large communities here in the center of Buffalo. And how does your work on this particular area, this idea of racial equity, stem from your demands of serving a congregation as large as yours?
Well, what comes immediately to mind is that Westminster really was fortunate to have a leader back at the turn of the century in the 1890s.
The turn of the last century.
The last century. Yes. Dr. Samuel Van Vranken Holmes. Dr. Holmes got to Westminster in the early 1890s and retired in 1934.
Wow.
He was there for just about 40 years. Yeah. I'm actually only the fifth pastor in about 120 years, senior pastor of the congregation. But
astounding.
So Dr. Holmes was here when Buffalo was, the heavy industry was booming. Immigrants were flooding into the community. This is, of course, before the time of unions and any kind of, regulation of hourly pay or work hours. And there was a lot of poverty, a lot of abject, heartbreaking poverty, and on the east side among the Germans. And so Dr. Holmes established Westminster House, which was the second settlement house in America after Hull House in Chicago. And so we really identify that as it somehow got into the DNA. And I say he founded it, but it really was the leadership that supported him and felt that that was the right thing to do and the important thing to do. And Since then, I would say there have been a succession of clergy, but supported by the lay leaders who have been committed to a stronger, better Buffalo and stronger neighborhoods, healthier communities. We are, like you at Temple Beth Zion, I think a regional congregation.
Right.
And so our members come from the north towns, the south towns, and one of the things that attracts people to Westminster, and not just members but visitors, is that we do have this commitment to the community and to the city.
Well, you have this big mission on the west side.
Yes, we about 12 years ago we started the Westminster Economic Development Initiative, which is a 501c3 that was responding to jobs, the need for jobs, education, and housing, as we learned about those needs in focus groups and had been at work in some ways in the immediately surrounding community anyway, and but bundled those together in a nonprofit that now is a small business incubator loan and coaching program, as well as an after-school English learner language program.
Wow. And that's so exciting to me. And I think what's interesting is the overlap in the motivations in both our communities. The Jewish community in Buffalo also motivated by immigrant settlement. So both communities, and one of the motivations for the creation of the Jewish Federation here in town was similar for the United Way, which is there were a lot of overlapping agencies doing the same things.
Yep.
And there was a real need to figure out how to economize. Everybody was giving lots of time, treasure, and talent,
right.
And they needed to figure out how to capitalize on it, working all together. So that's an exciting community to be drawn to help facilitate. It says this is a priority.
Definitely is. And, one of the other things that I think attracts people to Westminster, I don't think I know does, and that is our multi-faith relationships. We live in a world today when to be working and partnering with people of other faith traditions is not an exotic or strange thing to do, but it's essential to today's world because we live in a world that is often fragmented and at polar opposites. And so we have this Abrahamic faith tradition and core values which call us to work together, to love God, to serve our neighbor, and huge common ground, not only in sacred text, but in the values that we share. So people want to be associated with a congregation that has a wider perspective, not a narrow, isolated perspective.
Well, and we all are interested in overcoming Martin Luther King's criticism of Sunday at 11 o'clock being the most segregated hour of American culture.
Yes.
Speaking of American culture, if you're just joining us, I'm Rabbi Jonathan Freirich. I'm here with Reverend Tom Yorty. This is Crossroads, which is a joint production of Town Square Media and the Network of Religious Communities. And we're discussing really how we move our communities, or our communities move us in this case. Mm-hmm. And one of the interesting things is to get out of that hour where we are segregated into the community, to motivate or to be driven by our congregations, by our parishioners, to say, okay, what happens in between our Sabbaths? And how are we participating in the transformation of the world during these Sabbaths? How have you found, you spun off a whole not-for-profit. So how does your community, do they feel like one and done? They've done their work and now they're ready to just come in on Sundays?
Not at all. I mean, for example, we've sort of oriented to the east side of Buffalo. So we've actually established some partnerships and are engaged in a 4-way partnership with Bailey Green, with Back to Basics and Reverend Gillespie and Habitat for Humanity.
Wow.
To create a headquarters for peacekeepers, which is part of the Stop the Violence. On the east side, Habitat will rehab the entire home. We will pay for the rehab, Westminster will, and provide volunteers along with others do the rehab under the the leadership of Habitat. So
Wow.
so we're really eager to see to have some kind of partnership and outreach on the east side of Buffalo, which is new for us and very exciting. And yet, I was in a meeting just yesterday, Jonathan, learning about the severe poverty on the west side of Buffalo. I mean, it's a simplistic world to think that the west side is up and coming and real estate is going up, and we have all these wonderful immigrants who are, making the community and commercial life of the community more robust, and that the east side is where the great poverty is. And it's not true. There are wonderful, robust neighborhoods on the east side of Buffalo, and there's serious poverty on the west side. So I would just say, and part of this meeting said, we need to call for some sort of a map of the city, if not Western New York, but to understand who's out there, what are they doing, how are they addressing the problems of poverty, because anyway.
No, and this is one of the constant challenges that we face is people doing good often don't connect with all the other people who are doing good. And our diagnosis of what we need is limited by what we see and what we hear about. And normally we would say, okay, the city of Buffalo and Erie County would be those clearinghouses.
Right.
And thank God they are doing better at being that clearinghouse. And I wonder, and talking to all of you out there on a Sunday morning, I really am asking both, not just my colleague Tom, but all of you, what would it look like to have a real community clearinghouse conversation that said, okay, this block on the west side really needs some help, and this block on the east side, and this block in North Buffalo, and this block in South Buffalo. And we began to systematically say, okay, here's this great organization named Push that's doing amazing work on the west side, and here's First Shiloh Baptist that's doing fantastic organization on the east side, and how to connect us all.
Yeah, Jonathan, that's the vision. Actually, we thought of that yesterday. We said, and a clearinghouse, but also the mayor and the county executive commissioned a study some years ago on poverty, and I'm afraid that the study sits there on a shelf. If we could pull that study off the shelf and literally create a map of who are the NGOs out there, the non-governmental agencies that are, as well as other service agencies that are reaching out to address these problems, step A, because I think there may be some inefficiencies and waste because of overlap of services. And then also, how do we plug in, this block or that block? I read a recent study done by the Sam McGavern and the Partnership for Public Good.
Right.
The zip codes of 14213 and 14207, both on the west side of Buffalo, are among the poorest. One of them, I think it's the 13 zip code, in the top 25 poorest communities, zip codes in the state of New York.
Wow.
With an extraordinarily high proportion of single mothers, unwed, with small children.
And this, we combine this with the insights and the wisdom of Reverend George Nicholas, who reminds us from Lincoln Memorial United Methodist Church that we have health outcome differentials by zip code in this city that are drastic. We have life expectancy outcome differentials by zip code that are drastic. And all of these affect all of us, which gets us to this question, because there's one thing where what we're looking at is there a methodology, without creating yet another organization that we need to fund, right? Is there a mechanism that allows us to communicate between each other? And then there's the how do we get to know each other? Mm-hmm. And you and I have been drawn into this project of the Racial Equity Roundtable that says, first and foremost, before we can effectively help each other, we need to listen to one another.
Mm-hmm.
And this listening project, and it's a project that was started out of the Kellogg Foundation nationally, that said that truth and reconciliation in this country with regard to racism was never going to be done from the government or the judiciary, that we were going to need to crowdfund it, as it were. So they started with philanthropies, and they said, let's put together a racial healing methodology. Now, their methodology, and for those of you just joining us before we talk about racial healing circles, I'd just like to remind everybody, welcome to Crossroads. I'm Rabbi Jonathan Freirich, and I'm here with Reverend Tom Yorty of Westminster Presbyterian, and we're talking about this whole idea that no matter how much structural we do for our communities, at the heart of it, we need to figure out how to acknowledge each other's fellow humanity.
Yeah.
And so Reverend Yorty and I have both facilitated and participated in a number of racial healing circles. Our primary partners in this have been members of the Jewish community from sort of a Caucasian perspective, and Lincoln Memorial United Methodist from the African American community, and First Shiloh Baptist also in the East Side, and the African American community, and Westminster Presbyterian. So we've got 4 houses of worship that have been sort of our seeds. We're coming together with a much bigger multi-faith, multi-denominational, multi-house of worship event in the beginning of April. I don't know if you saw that. And so if you're interested, by the way, feel free to contact either of us, and we'll see if we can get you a seat at the table at a racial healing circle. So describe for me what it felt like to be drawn in for you into this, not just the first participating in racial healing circles, and what kind of feeling did you have that led you to think it would be worth facilitating?
Well, it was fascinating. My first experience being trained as a facilitator was to, of course, experience a healing circle, and with my clergy colleagues. And there was a clergy colleague who walked into the room, Pentecostal Latino pastor. So you couldn't get 2 people theologically probably more further apart than a Pentecostal and a cerebral Presbyterian.
A Yale Divinity School trained Presbyterian minister, who teaches more academia from the pulpit than rousing fire and brimstone.
Exactly. and so, and lo and behold, who would I be paired with in my healing circle experience than with this pastor? And it's interesting that, I like to think of myself as fairly open-minded, and yet I found that I had made some sort of personal internal judgments about this individual just because of his labels, his titles, Pentecostal, Latino, and didn't think we'd have a whole lot in common, really, to talk about. What happened was, and the question that we were posed with, and the healing circle, as you know, has 2 or 3 questions that move deeper and deeper to the point where the participants, in this case paired, but then coming back into the plenary, share something of their life experience. And the particular question we were dealing with actually allowed us to talk about close family members who were suffering from or who had died from cancer.
Wow.
And or at least that's the answer. That was our answer to the question. And I found as I spoke with my partner that he suddenly became a real human being. He was no more the Pentecostal Latino pastor. He was my brother, really. We, especially in this shared experience, many of the common same experiences, feelings, emotions, passions, feelings, as you see a loved one experience cancer, go through that as a family. So what I came away with from that meeting, after in the space of maybe that was a 20-minute conversation, 10 minutes each, was this deep bond, and it achieved exactly what you were saying, Jonathan, that we get to know each other as human beings in this community, and we live in different zip codes, we live in different suburbs and neighborhoods, and this is what the healing circle process does. It allows us to come together over those barriers and build bridges and bonds.
And for people who are feeling like this is maybe overexposure or an issue of vulnerability, I'd like maybe to paint a picture for everyone that what we're talking about is a highly structured setting that nonetheless results in a unique outcome. So if you can imagine 10 or 15 people sitting around in a circle, it's a safe space facilitated by people who've been through it a number of times, who are experts, who create what we would identify as holy space together.
Right.
So,
and yet I would say that is absolutely right, and that my experience of that conversation and subsequent conversations in healing circles that I've had is that they've been perfectly natural and organic. I mean, it hasn't been like, oh boy, now I got to come up with something. Or, it was just like, well, here's my experience in response to the question. But I would also say that, participating in a healing circle kind of gets us out of our comfort zone. That
For sure.
We do live in these sort of self-selected interest groups. We often live in bubbles. In terms of the whatever news we prefer, or the neighborhoods we live in, or where we go for entertainment, and so to get out of those bubbles can be a little uncomfortable. But what I found is it really challenged me to be authentic, to speak my own truth.
And this I think, figuring out how to do that particular thing, to speak our authentic, deep truth in a way that, first of all, we trust it will be heard, and to do so trusting also that we're not going to offend someone. Mm-hmm. We, at the core of the healing circle experience, in my mind, is a experiential wisdom that we need to bring to the public sphere, that says, look, I've shown up to this conversation, whatever it may be. And therefore, there's a presumption of respect and regard, a presumption of you and I are not the same person. We are going to say things that are going to rub each other the wrong way, and we're not doing it to accuse. We're not doing it to make one another uncomfortable. We're doing it in order to advance our sense of in it togetherness. Mm-hmm. 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 And, Reverend Nicholas put forward a book to me that I cannot help citing for everybody over and over again, this book called White Fragility, which I think it has been a seminal moment in my thinking. For clarity's sake, here we are, you and I, both white Jewish and white Presbyterian community leaders, working very, arduously on trying to figure out how to overcome this racism question. And how good is it that we have two white people working on this? Because after all, one of the things that White Fragility reminded me of, and I need to appeal to everyone out there to understand, that we need to stop asking people of color how to solve racism.
Right.
We are the ones who benefited from racism. We are the ones who maintain racist structures in society, and we are the ones who must be the agents of its undoing.
Right. Right.
The other thing that I learned from that, and also from racial healing circles, which I think is really important, is I need to stop justifying myself as not a racist. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you've had this conversation before, Tom, but I have often gone into a conversation with somebody who is a minority like me, whatever that means.
Right.
And spent the first part of it offering my resume of why I'm a good person. Here are the reasons why I am not, the KKK member lighting crosses on a minority person's lawn.
Right.
And we need to dig deeper. And what you're talking about, this shared brotherhood that you experienced at a racial healing circle, and the fact that at a racial healing circle, somehow or another, we are comfortable having conversations that we would otherwise not be comfortable having.
Yeah. And I think what better place than the religious community to host these conversations that otherwise would not take place in our culture, likely. and to be doing it at an existential level, not an intellectual or analytical level, but to be doing it with other real people. I completely agree. That it's not up. In one sense, as Henry Louis Gates says, there's one race. Race is an invented thing, but on the other hand, the invented races that we have caused a great deal of suffering and harm, and
That's
we
right.
need to understand. And I think white people, I am blind to the suffering and the pain that this racist institutionalization of the race systems causes for people. And so we somehow the blind, and so the healing circles really does get at the blindness as well as helping to, I think, establish the bond.
Absolutely, because I think what we're aiming for, first of all, we're aiming for a future that none of us know. We're aiming a future that, and part of the challenge that we face in society today is a cowardice in the face of the unknown.
Yeah.
Imagining a more equal future requires sacrificing a less equal now.
Yeah. And that other great quote that I love, which is to be the change that you envision and long for, and there's at a time when there's then anonymity and the celebration of the individual and the reseeding of people from real relationships into virtual worlds that are silos that require little empathy and no sacrifice. So I think stepping not only within our bubbles into real relationships, but out of those to engage others is a real call to action.
And you just said something that is a major catalyst for me right now, which is this week we begin to read in the Jewish world from the book of Leviticus. And most people have trouble reading the book of Leviticus because it is about the priesthood and the sacrificial system. And I spend a lot of time talking with people about how to speak about sacrifices. Bat and bar mitzvah students really love talking about, animal sacrifices. It's high on their list of things that they want to talk about. And yet, here we are saying, what do we need to give up? What do we need to give up about our perception of the world, about our perception of ourselves, about our attachments to the way things are in order to get to a place where things might be better?
And Jonathan, I can't think of a better Lenten practice.
Speaking of the time of year.
Time of year, that we are in the season of Lent, which is a time of giving up. And what better thing to give up, other than chocolate, these sort of racial stereotypes and or white power and privilege, and to live for 6 weeks in that, as you said before, that place we're afraid to go, and just put our toe in the water and see what that would be like.
Well, so there's a call to action for us as we head into this Sunday where many of us might be heading to a house of worship. Many of us in the Jewish world might be heading to religious school or Sunday school this morning. And this is a season leading to both of our holy days, right? We lead from Ash Wednesday last week to Easter in the Christian world. And we lead from Purim, which is coming up next week, to Passover in the Jewish world. And these days are meant to be days of meaning leading to something. What would we say as a Lenten call to action? In addition to giving up meat on Fridays, might we give up on something that we are attached to about ourselves?
Yeah. And trust, I would say. Trust that the image of God within us will complete us in a way that we didn't even imagine if we give up that one thing that we're attached to that may not really be central or essential to who we are.
Wow. Trust in the fact that the image of God, though it may not look like us, is still us.
Yeah.
There's a big sacrificial call and leap of faith for this season. Tom Yorty, senior pastor at Westminster Presbyterian Church in downtown Buffalo. Thank you so much for being with us here today on Crossroads. I'm Rabbi Jonathan Freirich. I look forward to a holy season of initiative and worthwhile sacrifice. Thank you so much for being with us.
Great to be with you, Jonathan.
Have a wonderful Sunday, everyone.